And welcome to Untethered with Jen Liss, the podcast that's here to help you break free, be you, and unleash your inner brilliance. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we're going to talk about what keeps you from being happy. Let's dive in. Hey there, friend. It's Jen. Welcome back to the podcast. So today's guest is Scot McKay. Now, what I knew about Scot prior to him joining is that he has traveled all over the world, has had some wild experiences like sipping coffee at Pablo Escobar's home that was served by his maid. He survived a shark attack while surfing. He held his breath as a pride of lions walked by his tent. Like, he has had some wild experiences in his life. Now I know that he has been to 110 countries. And why I brought him on the podcast was specifically to talk about relationships, because he has a dating podcast. He and his wife are relationship coaches. This is what they do. His show, The Mountaintop Podcast, has been named a top 10 dating podcast by datingadvice.com. So if you're interested in getting dating advice, you can go and check out his podcast. That's what we had intended to talk about. But we ended up shifting into entrepreneurship and courage and curiosity. And then we shifted into travel and what that does for the mind and religion and all kinds of topics that really are all interrelated and interconnected by the number one thing that is keeping us from living a life that we truly, truly love. The number one thing that is keeping us from being happy, whether it's in our relationships, our business, our life, spiritually, wellness, all things that are keeping us from truly living our most brilliant life. And that is because we are leaning into fear instead of leaning in to love. We are leaning into knowing instead of leaning into curiosity. So I know you're just going to love this conversation. Scot shares his opinion and his thoughts straight up. He's not shy about what he thinks. He's not shy about his views. He has a certain lens that he looks at the world through that has been created by all of the things that you're going to hear that he himself has experienced. He's looking through his lens, and this is how he sees it, how he sees what is right now in this moment. And what I appreciate about him is his humility to say, that might change over time. This is who I am today, and this is what I think today, and this is where I'm at. So hope you can come in and listen to this conversation with a beautiful open mind, with curiosity yourself. And I hope it brings up something really valuable for you as you listen in, and then tune in on Thursday, where I'm going to thread out a little bit out of this episode and go a little bit deeper. So without further ado, I welcome Scot McKay. Hi, Scot.
Hey, how's it going, Jen?
So good. I am thrilled to have you here because we're delving into an area where a lot of my listeners and I have not delved into together. We've delved into it on our own, but we have not delved into it, or maybe we haven't, in my case, until fairly recently. My relationship with spouse, I'm married to my high school sweetheart. And so that is like the last place that I have looked in my life. Like, I'm always like, oh yeah, career. I'm focused in these areas. And I've taken for granted much of my life. My husband's my podcast producer, so he's hearing this. I've taken for granted my relationship with my husband. And so on this podcast too, what I focus on is what my audience tends to focus on. We haven't talked a lot about relationships. So genuinely thrilled to have you come on and talk to us about it, because it's really important. Our relationship, not just with ourselves, but with others.
Yeah, well, when things are going the way we want it to go and we feel relatively satisfied, there's nothing broken there, and we don't feel the need to fix it, right? I mean, why fix what's broken? You'll just make things more complicated. Besides, it would drive your husband nuts. Right? This is really a great marriage. Let's go work on it. Let's go to counseling. Let's see how we can break it by trying to fix it. Yeah, I fully get why you would have talked about it. Here's the beauty of our particular conversation today, Jen, is I actually am an entrepreneur as well. I run businesses in a bunch of different niches. I have lots of cute little side hustles going. Only one of them is actually dating and relationships. So we can actually kind of hybridize this, if you will. We can run the Prius of podcasts here. We can talk about hybrid things. Yeah.
I love it. Well, and under the theme of untethered, what really drew me to you, you seem to have lived quite an untethered life, Scott.
Some would
Mobbed by
say
Dallas Cowboy,
unhinged.
unhinged. Yeah. Slight difference between those two things, and it depends. It's a fine line.
Yes. Well, I'm creative and I'm curious and I like to have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. What has led you to the point that you're at today as an entrepreneur through all of the experiences that you've had? Why is this the path that you chose, is building businesses for yourself and all of these little side hustles, as you say, focusing on relationships as one of them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I took my time getting here. I was raised to believe that if you went into business for yourself, you'd have to have rocks in your head. I mean, let someone else deal with legal and insurance and employees and ledgers and getting sued. And I mean, my dad was like, look, just go to work, get your money, come home, and then, you can have your weekend. This makes sense, right?
My dad too. I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah. And all I was told once I got into the IT world is my bosses would come to me and go, you're really, really brave and you have a lot of questions and you're really challenging. I said, that's a good thing, isn't it? No, you're a terrible employee and you probably need to run your own business someday. I've had like a bunch of bosses telling me that, like you're ruining my curve. You're making me feel like a slacker and I'm supposed to be the one running this company. Why don't you just go run and ruin? I guess we're probably only one letter apart.
Never really realized that, but true.
Yeah. There's no I in run, but there is in ruin. Hey. So, yeah, I'm going to steal that from myself because I just sort of stumbled across that joke right there. But it's kind of true, isn't it?
It is true.
And so I really was doing great things working in the cubicle jungle. I was succeeding, and then I was getting fired for succeeding because they didn't want to pay me the commissions. And I was thinking, maybe there's something to this wanting to run my own company. And where the run ruin thing comes in is I started getting a little uptight sometimes because of the decision making. I used to work for a company called Lucent Technologies, which was the product oriented spinoff from AT&T. And if you know anything about Scott Adams and Dilbert and his comics, that's the company he worked for. So I literally worked for Dilbert Incorporated, and they made the craziest, most horrible decisions, and we had to abide by them. So when I first started my business, and you're wondering how I got here, I'm telling you this is a different angle to this story than I've ever talked about, because this is a lot less pragmatic and a little more subjective, like what happened in my mindset to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point where you ever see, like, I don't know if it's Cars 2 or Cars 3, but the older stock cars tell Lightning McQueen, the kids will tell you when it's time to quit, when it's time to retire. That's happened in 2 of my careers so far. And strangely enough, even though I'm starting to become the Yoda of my own niche nowadays, I'm older than I look, by the way, 57.
I would not have guessed that. I thought you were closer to my age.
Oh, I'm not going to ask you your age. I'll just take it as a compliment.
41.
41. Woohoo! Oh, to be 41 again. I was 41 when my son was born, and he's now 16. I also have a 12-year-old daughter who was born when I was 45. I found myself running my own company, and it actually, despite the odds, I mean, nobody believed I could become a professional dating coach. This was back when the guys who ran the pickup artist stuff, the game and Neil Strauss's book, I wouldn't expect your audience to know much about that, really were defining the art of being an internet influencer. Like, this is one of the OGs of internet influence, was this particular niche. It was really hard to do. It's hard to succeed at. There are probably only like 20, 25 guys in the world making a decent living out of it. And the only one who believed in me was my fiance. Now my partner in both life and in business and parenthood and crime, adventure, all those things, was Emily. But it happened, and I was doing stupid things. I was making bad mistakes. But here's the thing: remember the run ruin thing. The beauty of it was, if management was making stupid decisions, and I had to abide by, I was no longer helpless. I could just look in the mirror and go, "Hey, you made a stupid decision. Do something," right? And I mean, the first whole year or 2, maybe even, that we ran the company, which is, the brand is X and Y Communications LLC, and now it's kind of a holding company for a bunch of things. I woke up every day going to work, expecting to be made to feel stupid because I learned something I should have known 2 years ago. Like I was just, the learning curve was immense. And there's still things I haven't figured out. But that's how we got here. And I'll tell you, rather than making my roots are helping gang kids get on the right track. So I mean, frankly, I was a coach before coaching was cool. And a lot of times people ask me, what's your, actually it doesn't happen as much as you would think it does, but people ask me what my track record is, what's my education, what makes you qualified to be a coach. I literally did undergraduate and graduate work in what's basically coaching before there was such a thing. It's all my education is focused on that. And it was great to help kids, but it got to be a little bit of a vita loco when I got married. So I went into the business world, but I just got sick of making a rich company help another rich company get even richer and feeling like a cog in that machine.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really, really cathartic and wonderful to be able to build a business and replace my income and do it while helping people find love and making a difference in the world and kind of having a little bit of a global influence. It felt kind of fun to be recognized at airports and stuff like that and have our podcast be number one in its category back in the old school days. As we grew our family, it was nice to have our freedom. We decided that when our kids became school age, we weren't going to let the public school system tie us down if our jobs weren't. So now we do what's called world schooling our children. We were doing a lot of international travel. My wife and I have been to over 100 countries together. The kids have been to about 30. But then they became heroes at racing BMX. And so now we've been doing a lot of BMX racing in the United States for the past several years. So it's just a different chapter, and we're doing what we want to do. And it's nice to be able to pack up the RV on a Tuesday afternoon and leave for a month and have your neighbors wonder what just happened. Not that their opinion matters. It's just nice for us to be able to do that and still be able
Pretty
to
untethered.
business. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty untethered. Yes.
Yeah, this world education, there's a couple things I want to pull out of all of this. And thank you for sharing that full story, because there's little bits of it that each of us can relate to. But the world schooling is so fascinating. My husband and I, one of the things we do with our nieces and nephews when they graduate college, we take them on a trip somewhere. We got to take my nephew this past summer. He's a huge baseball fan. So we went to an East Coast. We put together our own baseball tour, and we didn't rent a car. We just took the train. And so he got lots of experiences. But after, where he came up to me a couple months ago at Christmas and he said, my mind is completely opened in a whole new way that it never had been before. And my heart just just came out of my chest, because it was just so cool to hear him say that. Travel is so huge. How has that influenced? I know it's not like mostly what we're talking about, but how has that influenced your kids' lives?
First of all, you could line up like 6 major league baseball stadiums just on the Metroliner in the Northeast.
It's true.
Amazing. Yeah.
We went to 5. We went to 5 stadiums total. It was cool.
Well, you didn't leave out Camden Yards, did you?
That was the first one we went to. Good. So cool.
That warms my heart because I'm a Baltimorean.
Oh, you are? Well, they played the Royals and we're Royals fans, and Baltimore won. So that was a sad moment, but it was such a cool ballpark.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny because my brother and his family had that bucket list item to go to every baseball stadium in the United States. And, we do the same thing. And they just completed it, by the way. Isn't that cool?
That is so cool.
I have always kind of built my travel bucket list around go to this certain place and do this certain thing. Like go to Tokyo, Japan and eat kaiten sushi, which is the sushi on the conveyor belt, right? Or go to Zambia and swim in the devil's swimming pool, or go to Ethiopia and eat Ethiopian food with injera bread, something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm always curious. I don't believe what the news people tell me. I don't believe the spin on anything. I always want to see things for myself. But the hidden benefit to the travel to us is why I think you're asking. Is it's really hard not to love everybody in the world. It's really hard to hold on to your cognitive biases. It's really hard to hold on to prejudices or any kind of preconceived notion, not only about the people who live in a country, but about the nature of the country's culture itself. It's hard to hold on to the arrogant mentality that Americans are the best at everything. I mean, I grew up watching the Olympics going, how could this guy from Lithuania beat the American? He's the American. You know what I mean? and you come home and you root for the Lithuanian because you met the bunch of them, and doesn't make me any kind of expat or anything, or certainly I after all these countries, and I don't know what people think of this, but this is actually an informed opinion because I've been to 110 countries. I still believe America's the greatest country on earth. I understand it's a biased opinion. Australia is really, really good. Okay, but some of the things that happened there during COVID, et cetera. And of course, we have things we need to work through. But I've never been to a country I'd rather live in than the United States. And of the 110 I've been to, I really have a lot of respect for the people who live in many of those developing countries because they haven't kind of adopted this hive mind of social media and a lot more critical thinking going on there, and people just living with the people in the real world around them. And they seem oddly happier, than people who just have been buried in social media getting angry.
Mm-hmm.
Is the beauty is our kids, a lot of times people, when they're anti-racist, they'll say, I'm colorblind. I think that's a shallow way to look at it. I prefer a world, and my kids have been conditioned thus through world travel. I mean, they've been taught, conditioned. I guess taught is a flowery, more positive term than conditioned. But my kids have been intentionally taught to see people who they are, inquire about their culture, understand the differences. But I think ignorance creates fear. And I think fear creates, a word that I don't like using unless it's the right word in the sentence, which is hate. And I think hate is the author of all forms of prejudice and bigotry in the world. It's pretty puny if you think about it, because it's all fear.
Yeah.
And when you have the courage to go out and understand somebody and what they're doing, it doesn't mean there are some people that aren't going to be inherently cruddy and some people will be better. Most of us have a gray area. We're all kind of in the middle. We're all human. We have our moments. But when you understand another country and you understand their culture and you understand the people who live there, you don't worry so much about the color of their skin or the God they're praying to or what the political structure of their government is. And you realize the government can be very, very different than the people who live there. And the people who live there are generally very, very nice, wonderful people. And that's how our kids have been raised. And that's how our kids live their lives. And they get confused by anti-Semitism or, anti-Islamic feelings, or why there's a need, for, combat racism. I mean, my 5-year-old daughter would be like, Dad, why don't these people just get it? I'll never forget. I took my son and my daughter and my wife, all of us. We went on a Middle Eastern trip to a lot of majority Muslim countries. And this was when my son was about 6 years old or 7 years old. So that's about 2015. And my son was like, Dad, why do Americans not like Muslims? These people are really nice and really hospitable. And so it was a great teachable moment. And that is that opening of the mind. If you're curious, if you're inquisitive and you're this is going to sound like too much of a meta thought, but you're open to having your mind opened.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? First of all, you have to have an open mind, and then you have to give yourself the opportunity.
There's a willingness to expand it a little bit further.
And there's the reality of it happening, right?
Yeah.
And it's just you come home and you see things a different way than other people did. You read the news a different way than other people have. Like what's going on between Hamas and Israel right now. Our family looks at it through a much more holistic lens in a world where everybody feels like they just have to take sides, or you're not in my echo chamber anymore. And, we've just kind of just looked past that way of thinking, and not in an arrogant way. But I mean, nobody asks. It's amazing how nobody cares. Nobody cares how many countries we've been. Nobody ever asks. Mm-hmm. People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And people don't even give you the opportunity to care until it benefits them somehow, So, we've been places like North Korea. And I think the only time anybody's ever asked us what was North Korea like was when their kid was doing a report on it, and someone added Emily on Facebook, goes, you need to talk to those two because they've actually been there. Oh, cool. Nobody else cares. So
Hmm.
it is a beautiful thing in your personal journey to travel. I think most people should prioritize it. And for a lot of people, it's the last thing in their budget. There's so many other things I got to get done first before I go travel. And I know it's easy to say that, but um, there's a real benefit to travel. And nobody can ever repossess it. It doesn't rust. It's always going to be
So
there for
true.
you. Yeah, your experiences from it are always going to be there for you.
Yeah, what you get to hold on to that and you're passing it along to your kids too, which is really cool. Something that you said there about how it just sparked something for me about seeing things as they are. Curiosity is the door to that. And, the more and more, the older I get, the more I start to see some of the Buddhist beliefs that in me, it just feels like, yes, like it is what it is. And the more that we can see it that way, that's more loving. I think curiosity, courage, those are all things that are in that loving bucket as opposed to the fear bucket. And we're living so much in the fear. And that comes to so many things, like holistically,
Sure.
love and fear.
Yeah.
And so I just, so much of what you were saying really resonates and also feels affirming. And I hope that some of the listeners might feel that way for themselves. And maybe it's like a permission slip, like go travel, go let yourself have the experiences.
I trust so.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go back to this very interesting thing that you said at the very beginning, your joke about running a business versus ruining a business. And I would love to hear, we're going back to that I thing because it's so true. The more, which actually comes to some of these things we're talking about too with divisiveness, because the more I that is in something, the more ego that is in something, the more difficult it can sometimes be. What I'm finding as a business owner is that the more I remove from my business, the easier it's coming, the more enjoyable it is, the more it's benefiting other people as well. So I'm curious what that experience was for you. When did you make that shift from those moments of like what you felt like were maybe failure into starting to have it run more fluidly? What changed for you?
Well, I have to admit, it's a little hard to it's much more difficult, perhaps, in my line of business than yours to disassociate us from the product because we kind of are the product because we're coaches,
True.
and we're the forward customer facing image of the company.
Yeah.
Um, so to answer your question contextually in the way you asked it, man, there over 18 years, the way the internet works and what drives traffic and how people are consuming their information and the way they want to consume the information, it evolves. And if you don't evolve with it, you get run over like a freight train.
Mm.
So we've had to do that. And that I think is where your ego can get in the way. I remember the first couple years I ran this business. I just detested those pop-up windows that come up on on your webpage saying, join my newsletter. It's like, God, this is so annoying. So I refused to do it. And someone said, well, you big dummy, that's why you only have 200 people on your mailing list. You know, I had a couple breaks that grew it, to like 4,000, but I had some people who were a lot more famous than I am give me a break and promote me. And that helped me grow my email list. But when I finally said, just because it doesn't work for me or I don't like it doesn't mean it isn't the right thing to do or there's something wrong with it or it's inherently unethical or evil or bad. I think a lot of times as soon as we have a taste for something or a distaste for something, we put good and evil on it when really it's just someone thinks differently about it. So 58,000 email list subscribers later, after I had adopted this while rolling my eyes at it, I realized, maybe sometimes it's better to be correct than arrogant. Also, that the simple fact that I'm relationship oriented and I believe and I like women, and I think that's the secret to my success with women. And my wife likes men, and we're positive and we're generous and we're givers. Doesn't mean everybody comes to us with that mindset. Some people have had a rough experience and they've taken it personally, and it's a little bit of the blame game going on. And a lot of people really just want to go out and have a lot of sex without any commitment. And, if I project onto people and legislate morality and I project, you should have a relationship exactly like Emily and I have, you know, that's just really judgmental, and it's not really serving the audience who comes to me. I once got an email from a wonky engineering company that I do business with, and they were touting all their engineering features they came up with over the course of the previous 90 days for their quarterly newsletter that they sent to me. And they were extremely proud as they announced, we've been answering questions nobody's even asking and giving you, giving you features nobody's even asked for yet. And I just thought to myself, what a waste of time.
Yeah.
Because, I got this list of like 40 things I wish they did, and they didn't do any of them. And they spent all their engineering resources answering questions nobody's asking. And I think if you let your ego get in the way, especially when you're running a business that's a coaching business or something like that, you'll start answering questions you think people are asking when they're really not, instead of really doing the market research and listening, and you've probably figured out by now that I'd love to listen to myself talk, but listening is paramount to know your audience. And of course, anything that's incongruent with your belief system, you avoid, but that's where kind of fine tuning who your customer avatar is and messaging specifically to the people who you want in the business comes in. But you got to make sure you at least have an audience, out there for that who actually matches up with that. That's all.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, I mean, that listening, and sometimes we even hear that, but we don't hear that because we're just still listening to ourselves. Can really get caught up in that cycle. So what do you, if there is a business owner, just a simple something that they can do to support themselves in better listening? Do you have any tips for that and how to better listen to your audience?
Well, if you have an audience, survey them, ask them. You may not get the answers packaged the way you want them. And you may also find your audience goes, I have no idea. So sometimes you have to read between the lines, and you have to like bring up topics in your Facebook group or in your email list or your podcast and just see what resonates, and then focus on the things that resonate. Also, the KISS technique is paramount. And I've outsmarted myself so many times. Like when they go to the website, when folks listening or watching go to the website that I suggest at the end, they're going to find the podcast that my wife and I have been doing together since 2006. That's called X and Y on the Fly. And I thought that was the greatest name ever because it's so catchy. And then nobody knew what it was. There's no topic. So we called it X and Y on the Fly dating podcast. It was like, oh, okay. And then we put it in the right category and people listen to it. But it's funny. It's a long form podcast, like 40 minutes to an hour like this, like it's interviews and stuff. We decided we wanted a punchier. This was like when everybody was experimenting with this. We wanted to run another show, make it punchier, like 2-3 minute episodes, like every day. And we called it, this is 2 years later, Dating Cast. Wow. We were thinking ourselves into a rut. We outsmarted ourselves. Dating Cast is a much better name. You know what it's about, and you know what we're up to. So, that was kind of like an aha moment for me to just kind of simplify things. Not to the point of being simplistic, but, simplify things.
Yeah. Help people find you.
Yeah. And as the years go by, I realize I may be sick to death about talking about the basics, but there's people who just joined yesterday who haven't heard it yet. So, you have to kind of focus on the fundamentals sometimes and then add the original content to that, kind of layer it on, maybe.
Yeah. I've used this example before, but it's because I used to be such a fan when I was in middle school. But Hanson is probably so tired of singing MMMBop, but that's really what people come for. And then they get to show the people their new songs that shows, oh, we're actually really talented musicians. They genuinely are.
I read along the same lines. I read an interview with Don McLean, and they asked him, "Do you ever get sick of singing American Pie? It's your one of your only hits, and certainly your biggest hits. And it's like 9 minutes long." He goes, "Nope."
That's it.
Was nope. Good grief, made him. It gave him his Wikipedia page, basically. Like, what am I going to be sick of it? This is the greatest thing that's ever happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's gratitude right there. He's grateful for what it's offered him.
I think the sentiment there is I could also do a repetitive motion along an assembly line every day for the last 40 years and make minimum wage for it. At least this one brought some blessing with it above and beyond that,
Yeah, it's so true. Well, I'm noticing a thematic in this conversation and a thematic about what you're sharing in general about an opening or an openness and a listening and a curiosity and letting yourself have experiences. Is there anything else that across the board has supported you in crafting this, pretty untethered life that you are loving so much and that your family is getting to experience alongside of you as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the curiosity comes a sense for adventure. I really just want to take a bite out of life. Back when Facebook came out, I started reconnecting with my friends who I hadn't seen for like 20 years. And one of them said, "You know what I remember most about you, McKay?" And I was like, "Oh God, here we go." And he said, "You love being alive more than anybody I've ever met." I was like, "Huh, I'll take
What a
that as a
compliment.
compliment." Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I think there's been an optimism though. I think the optimism drives it. Like, yeah, this could work. I think, it's glass half full. Let's fill the rest of the glass. Let's go do this. I'm up for it. The curiosity drives that. Also, I mean, there's two kinds of people. There's people who have a sense of humor and people who think they have a sense of humor, right? I wanted to make darn sure I was in the former category, not the latter. I mean, easily offended people suck. And if you're offended by that, well, it's a non sequitur to me. Easily offended people suck. That's an insult. You insulted me. I was like, hey, it wasn't intentional. I just think, life's too short to be so wadded up over things. And there's a lot of platitudes you could put up with that. And, don't sweat the small things. And most things are small things, all this stuff. But not a lot of people are curious. Not a lot of people. I mean, the sunset can be gorgeous and people just don't even care. Something amazing could be happening. And people just keep their nose buried in the smartphone, looking at cat memes, and something amazing's happening in real life right around them. And I want to know more. My family and I, we started watching this show that turned out to be fantastic called Reservation Dogs on Hulu.
Heard of that?
Yeah, it's about it delves into a Native American lifestyle. And I've come to the conclusion, my goodness, we know nothing about these folks. We've put them on the reservation and let them do their thing. I have never had to Google so much as I'm watching a show in my entire life. And I just think it's great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm Shazamming every song. I'm Googling every word that comes up that I've never heard before. And
We called it weird and we called it different and we write it off. It's like, oh, not relevant.
Yeah, right. And my wife is like, no one else is doing what you're doing. I was like, this is great because I've never had to Google so much in my entire life. And my wife was like, realize everybody else just watches it and just, they don't understand. They just keep going. I said, I don't think I have it in me. But the optimism is important because optimism is what makes life fun instead of making life a drag. Bad things are going to happen. My wife and I, people look at our Facebook highlight reel and think we live this charmed life, and it's wonderful. And I have gratitude. I think the optimism and the gratitude are very important. But I mean, we also have very mundane things that happen, and we've had very bad things happen in our family. And because my wife and I are going through it together, that's a plus. But nobody gets out of life alive. And, you might as well enjoy what you can while you're doing it. And I know that sounds Pollyanna-ish to some, but you also got to remember a movie like Life is Beautiful wins an Academy Award because of how it makes people feel. Alberto Benigni, if you've never seen this wonderful movie that's subtitled, of course, but still won an American Academy Award. He's in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany with his son, and he turns it into a competition, a game with his son. And that's what keeps him alive till liberation happens, keeps his son alive. And that's why it's a beautiful movie, because he's looking for optimism even in the darkest of circumstances. I don't think enough people are optimistic. And I think we're being told by some sort of socio-political agenda to think that America is the worst place on earth and people are all awful and we're more divided than ever. But if you actually leave Twitter or Facebook or MSNBC or Fox News, you go out and actually talk to people like you and I are talking to each other right now, and actually in real life, you find that all of us just want to be happy and get along and live our lives. Black, white, gay, straight. And why should I stand in the way of that? I should be a part of that instead of in opposition to that. And sometimes people let themselves become jaded enough where they think they're doing the right thing. And really they've bought into this narrative of we're all divided and you're wrong and I'm right, but I'm going to rescue you because I'm so great.
Mm-hmm.
Man, just go out and talk to people. I would go so far, Jen, to say that the cornerstone of my admittedly Christian belief system nowadays is gratitude
Yeah.
and humility. Whenever we start thinking we've got God figured out, you go to India and you see people doing things that affect you spiritually and go, well, that's not in my Bible, but neither is my Ford pickup truck. And you start, like I'm an avid lucid dreamer, and I've had people told me that's like satanic and witchcraft and stuff. I go, well, what if it's a gift from God in my mind? I don't feel particularly evil or unblessed or something because I did it. And of course, don't get me started on the bless me culture and the prosperity gospel and stuff. God is bigger than we are. We're never going to figure God out. And I'm just grateful I'm allowed to get done whatever I get done here, and I get another day. And that humility and that gratitude has made me a lot more spiritually fulfilled, since I gave it up, since I gave up trying to figure God out.
Yeah. Ooh, that's powerful. Yeah. This journey has brought me back home to spirituality as well. And in my own way, and just not trying to do it right. Because I think we try to do everything right. We try to do spirituality. We try to get it right. And I think that's, from my perspective, that's a lot of the social media things that you're talking about. We feel judged, or we feel guilty, or we feel all these things. And so then we start to do what everybody else is doing because of all of that feeling, which is all fear-based, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
that guides us into doing things that really aren't even fully in alignment for ourselves. So I think opening up to that curiosity, having the humility to step back, because I think being curious actually takes courage. It takes courage to be one of the people who's willing to say, you know what, I have a question about that. It takes a lot of courage to raise the hand.
The whole Zeigarnik effect of having an open loop, but I don't know an answer to it, drives me nuts. And I find it amazing that we've been created with that yearning by whatever created us that we can never understand, because I think it's kind of like what I call God's dirty little trick. I think I just, whoever God is, whoever the Christian God really is that we can't fathom or understand, just is greatly entertained by us. That's what I really honestly believe. I mean, that may sound more like Baruch Spinoza's God than the Christian God, but hey, it's hard to deny that's the case. But yeah, absolutely. I also think that when you have humility and gratitude, it takes a lot of stress off your life, makes you healthier, makes you happier, it makes you a better business person, because then you're not demanding people agree with you and buy what you want to sell them. You're more open because you're genuinely curious, like you alluded to, about what they are, what they want, and you have a passion, you have a purpose, but it's also, that's where the roots are, but the branches have to be, they have to provide fruit for the people who actually partake of the fruit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hope that's not too deep, but made sense to me.
I'll go too deep on every turn. And in fact, I want to come back around to your thing you said so flippantly, but feels so profound to me, which is it's reducing again that I and letting it be run. Like let what is supposed to flow out of you. And when we remove that I out of it, it's really,
it seems
really
like
powerful.
If you add I to running something, that's when you ruin it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like,
yes, it's like the other way around.
Horse in front of the cart there. Yeah.
Yeah. You get to go write your next book about this. Let me know how it goes, Scott.
There's no I in team, but there is an I in ruin. Yeah.
I love it.
The
Thank
I
you
in
so
running
much.
something.
Yeah, go ahead. You could take this really far. There might be. There totally might be. I ask every guest who comes on this podcast one question, and so I'm going to pose it to you.
Uh-oh.
It's not a hard one, or maybe it is. I don't know. We'll see. Scott, where do you see the magic in the world?
People, human beings. I mean, any living creature, actually. Yeah. We train whippets now. And everybody loves whippets and thinks they're the coolest breed of dog, but nobody would dare have one because they're high maintenance. They're just really high strung and run. Now, my daughter's, like I said, we race things in this family. My daughter wanted a new puppy, and she gave me 30 days of wanting the same actual dog, and then we'll go get it. Because, every day it went from a Westie to a Bostie to a Frenchie. And now it was a whippet. And because she wants to teach it how to race, and she's done a great job at it. We're on our second whippet now. But, I grew up not having pets, and I've become a dog person, even though they're a pain in the ass. It's because they'll love you unconditionally, and so you got to love them back. And they're just so cute. They have this look in their eyes, and they do cool things, and that's heartwarming. I think for a lot of men, a lot of men are being taught that we need to reclaim masculinity, and we do. But that's vis-a-vis being told our masculinity is toxic. And that's an agenda, because in order to, and if you're coming from really any kind of world religion, by the way, the whole idea of fear being the opposite of love is not anti-Christian. If you read your Bible in the original languages, that's basically how it goes. If God is love, the satanic influence is fear based. It's anytime there's fear and mind control, that's not coming from God. Right. So, when you have this idea of people being afraid and they start loving instead, someone asked me on a podcast what true love was. And it seems like the big holy grail for marriage. It's when you stop fearing your wife. Right. So the whole idea of a toxic thing has to be a perversion of something that was created in love, right? And so there has to be virtuous masculinity. And yet it seems like society wants to, there's certain huge guys with huge followings out there who say, yeah, you know what, guys, double down on the toxic masculinity. Tell them to screw themselves and we're going to be toxic together. By the way, be stoic, just scowl at everybody and be tough and do hard things. And I'm like, God, every Clint Eastwood movie I've ever saw where he was scowling at everybody, he didn't have a girlfriend.
So true.
And then, it's the guys who are charming and bring out the fun and invite a feminine nature to come out and play who are really the masculine. And so, inviting, people to freely be who they are, men, women, that makes life more fun. And it kind of takes you away from fearing being judged and fearing becoming something you're not. And we're all hardwired this way. And again, I mean, if you're curious enough to go old school like that, you start realizing it works. And I think that's just another little fun thing to lay on top of this whole love versus fear thing. Is I think guys in particular, and maybe a lot of the ladies in the audience maybe this will solve a puzzle for them, like not understanding men. We think we got to be all tough and be dangerous and stuff like that. I mean, we have to do what's hard when we have to, but that doesn't mean sometimes what's hard is listening to your wife. Like one of the guys I know, I mean, this is going to get real visceral, but I mean, he's real tough and he does Brazilian jiu-jitsu and runs business and scowls at everybody, but when one of his loved ones was dying of cancer, he didn't have the guts to go see her because he didn't want to see her that way. It would freak him out. Well, the hard thing to do is go there, be there for her and stop worrying about your own self. Well, apparently that was too hard. But see, that's because the internet will tell you if you do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and crawl in the mud and do tough mudders and things like that, then you're doing what you're supposed to be doing as a man. But that's, again, a lack of curiosity and a lack of thinking for yourself. But I'm really glad we had this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I love that everything that you just shared there. I'm glad that you brought it back to relationships. I'm glad you mentioned dogs because I've got a new rescue dog, and allowing him to be himself. That's actually my most loving act that I can do for all of us, for our relationship together, for us. And the same, that's what I'm finding with my husband. It's really getting over my own fear, getting over our own fear of having a hard conversation, getting over the fear on both sides. That feels like that's just such a strong thematic of this conversation and what I'm personally feeling in my life as well. So thanks for bringing it back to that.
Yeah. You were talking about the magic and as you kind of wrapped it there, there's this old Edie Brickell song. I think it was her only song. And it's like, it says, philosophy is the talk on a cereal box. Religion is the smile on a dog. Yeah, that's what that lyric means. That's where the magic is. It's an interacting, and I would say it's mostly about human to human interaction. We have these guys called men going their own way, and at the risk of offending someone again, fourth wave feminism has become very angry. It's anti-man sometimes. And when men and women start really detesting each other and blame each other and claiming victimhood, I've never seen anybody be happy in that. And so the guys, I really enjoy women. I really respect women, and I love women who love men and believe in us getting along. And my wife and I are like that. My wife has always loved boys, and I've always loved girls, and here we are, Those guys who are like I'll focus on the men who are getting the men going their own way movement can't stand my message. They need me not to exist. And it's not that they think I'm wrong. They need me to be wrong. They call me a unicorn, or you got lucky, or some extenuating circumstance causes your wife to be with you. A lot of schadenfreude. But there's no magic in that. You're just going to die angry and alone. The magic is embracing other people. And I think the more curious you are about the other people, let's bring it full circle. That's the best reason to travel, is to meet the people, And I that is where the magic is. And I'm not sure it's even magic. It's just kind of like a truth waiting to be uncovered,
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. I'm fascinated by you. I loved hearing all of the things that you had to share and how you're so willing to share your open perspective. I think that's something that a lot of us are scared to do this day and age. And I appreciate you sharing your genuine, authentic expression. So thanks for coming on and sharing. Where can people connect with you, work with you, and find you?
Well, I appreciate you. I always appreciate the opportunity to have conversations like this and share with a new audience. Hey, we would love to meet you. We would love to introduce you to the podcast. And if you're interested in your relationship, whether you're married or still single, man or woman, go to scotandemily.com/free, because everybody loves something free, right? My name is with one T, ScotMckay. And scotandemily.com is ScotAndemily.com, and just put /free on top of that, or in front of that. And when you get there, you can download my book. It usually goes for $37 in the store all day long. But you can get the ebook and the audio version for free. No strings attached. And then in the middle of the page will be a podcast for women, which is actually for both men and women, called X and Y on the Fly, the one I mentioned before. And if you happen to be a man listening to this show, the overwhelmingly popular, podcast we have for guys of character who are interested in relationships and being better men and being better with women, is called Mountaintop, the Mountaintop, and you'll find that on the right. We have relationship programs, a men's and women's version you'll find on there. And if you want to talk to us and get to know us, we'd love to hear from you. And you can schedule 25 minutes with us for free right at the bottom of that very page at scotandemily.com/free.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Everybody, the links are in the show notes, so you can go and check it out and connect with Scot.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Wow. I really cannot wait to hear what you think about this episode and all of the things that might have come up for you. So one of my intentions with the podcast this year is to explore some arenas where I have not explored before, to invite some perspectives on that I've not invited before. And Scot was a wonderful delve into that environment. So give me a little ping and let me know what you think. I'm Hello Jen Liss. You can email me at hello@jenliss.com. You can reach out to me. I'm at UntetheredJen on Instagram. I would love to hear what you think of this. Tune in to Thursday's episode, where I'm going to pull out a little thread from our conversation with Scot and delve a little deeper. Thank you so much for listening. It means the world to me that you did. You just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time. Bye.